My daughter is scared of the monster in her closet. She should be. Past the blaring light of the hallway, I could only see her silhouette. "There's a monster in my closet," she said. My wife was more awake than me. She started to get out of bed. "No," my daughter said. "You don't go, Mommy. Daddy is braver." "Peter, you hear that?" "Apparently you're braver," my wife mumbled as she slid back into the covers. "I am," I said. The girl took after her mother with an overactive imagination. This wasn't the first time our daughter had woken us up in the middle of the night with abstract fears, and I feared it wouldn't be the last. As I dug my slippers out from beneath the bed, I convinced myself that with a bit of rational thinking, I could put an end to these two wake-ups. "It's the squiggle again," she whispered, dangling her legs from the bed. The squiggle was just another in a long list of creatures that would hide in my daughter's closet. There were goblins, there were bears, and after a fumbled explanation of world politics, Osama bin Laden shared the closet space for about a month. That night it was the squiggle. She kept on looking at the closet door, expecting me to open it like I always did, but I didn't. Instead, I sat down next to her on the bed. "Can you describe the squiggle to me, Annie?" I said. She looked back at the closet, as if she was asking it for permission to speak. "It doesn't feel real," she finally whispered. "Well, Annie, that's because... ... It's like spaghetti, but with eyes, and it's on fire." Her eyes were filling up with tears again. "It doesn't feel real. It's like a drawing. A drawing that no one should ever draw. It doesn't feel real." "Annie, have you ever considered the squiggle doesn't feel real because it isn't actually real?" "What does consider mean?" she asked, wiping her tears. It's when you think about something really hard. It's when you think about something you thought was true, but you think about it really hard and you realize it's not true." The thoughts of the closet drifted from her face. She was no longer a scared child, she was a young mind trying to make sense of the world. "Do you ever consider things?" "Yes," I said, "all the time." "And does it help?" "When I was about your age, your grandfather used to take me to the lake every weekend. One time, while we were out swimming, he told me that there was an angry octopus that lived inside of the lake that ate little boys. I got so scared I refused to get back in the water." "And was there an octopus?" "No, your grandfather was just playing a trick on me. There was never any octopus in the lake, but I didn't believe that. The octopus felt real to me. After hearing my grandfather's story, I was sure I could feel the octopus in the water. I was sure he was there." "But then you considered that he wasn't there," my daughter said, thoughtfully. There was awe in her voice, as if I had revealed some grand cosmic secret to her. "You considered and you weren't scared anymore." A bit of the summer breeze drifted in through the open window. My daughter no longer seemed scared. I felt like a good dad. "Do you want to consider that maybe the squiggle is just a figment of your imagination?" "What's a figment?" "It doesn't matter. Just consider that there is no monster in your closet." "Okay," she shut her eyes in concentration. For a moment she struggled with her thoughts, but then her eyes opened. She smiled. "Thank you, Daddy," she said. Outside the sky was a chaotic smattering of stars. Somewhere off in the distance, a police siren crawled into the night. I was the only one looking at the closet. "Not scared anymore?" I asked. "No. I considered the squiggle might not be real, and now I'm not scared." "Great," I said and got up. "Good night, Annie." "Good night, Daddy." "Me." She pulled her unicorn covers over herself and shut her eyes. I looked at the closet. It was covered with cartoon horse stickers that had fused themselves into the wood. The closet would forever remain covered in ponies. It perplexed me how anyone could be scared of such a harmless piece of furniture. "Hey, Annie," I said, eyeing the closet handle. "Want me to check inside of the closet?" She sat up in bed, confused. "Why? There's nothing there." Another rush of pride went through my lungs. The talk had gone better than expected. "For old time's sake," I said. She laughed at me as if I was ridiculous for suggesting that something might be in the closet, but she sat up in bed to get a better view. I grabbed the handle and prepared to swing the door open in a theatrical fashion. But I couldn't. I was positive that there was nothing in the closet. I knew that the squiggle was just a product of my daughter's imagination. I even found the idea of spaghetti with eyes to be a bit funny. Yet somewhere deep within me, a primal fear bubbled. I was consciously aware that the closet was empty, but there was doubt in my heart. "Daddy," she asked, "are you scared?" "No," I said. "I'm not scared." I pulled open the door and defiantly stared into the abyss of tiny dresses and coats. For a brief moment, my chest calmed. For a brief moment, my rational mind took control and chastised me for being overly dramatic. But then, in the darkness of the clothes, I saw movement. I saw it. I saw that blasphemous monstrosity that confounded my entire perception of the universe. I saw that horrid nightmare pried from the depths of God's fever dreams. I saw the squiggle. The visage of the corroded flesh stole the blood from my face. Its sickly eyes stared deep into my soul. My knees became weak. I couldn't stand in the same world that the monstrosity existed in. The unyielding pressure of an incoming faint pushed my body off balance. Before the curtains of reality came down, I remember swaying toward the closet. My face became intimately familiar with one of the cartoon horse stickers my daughter had attached to the furniture. With a dull wooden thud, I lost consciousness. I awoke to the sensation of frozen peas pressed against my forehead. The lights were on. I was on the couch in the living room. Next to me sat my wife, one hand on the makeshift ice pack, the other gripped around her phone. "Should I call an ambulance?" she asked. "No," I said. "No, I'm fine." "You're shaking." I was. The after-image of the horror was still bouncing around my skull. The unexplainable madness that I had witnessed was still sending twitches through my shivering muscles. "I'm fine," I repeated. "What happened?" My mouth felt like it was full of battery acid. There were no words to explain the ghastly fiend that I had seen hiding in my daughter's closet. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pray. I wanted to beg the heavens for some sort of explanation for the cruel images that were seared into my mind. I finally said, "I'm fine. Are you sure?" "Yes." She lifted the frozen peas off of my forehead. "Doesn't look like you'll need stitches." "Good," I said. I wasn't there. I wasn't sitting on my couch being tended to by my wife. I was somewhere else. I was standing stark naked before a cruel world I never knew existed. A horrible blizzard of incomprehensible shapes was freezing my bones. I was a frail worm face to face with the Goliath of the abyss. I was nothing in a world that meant me harm. Yet suddenly, past the fear, past the soul-shattering features of the abomination, something recognizable took hold. A familiar worry grasped my being. I sat up on the couch. "Where's Annie?" "Sleeping," my wife said. "I came as soon as I heard the crash. The blood from your cut scared her for a bit, but she was tuckered out enough to fall asleep." I got up and moved straight towards my daughter's bedroom. My fear of that horrid creature had not passed. With every step towards her room, my jaw clenched tighter and tighter, but my legs carried me regardless. I needed to make sure my child was safe. She was lying in bed, deep in her dreams. The unicorn covers were pulled over her face. Her closet was shut. "Are you coming back to bed?" My wife's touch made me flinch. I couldn't keep my eyes off the closet. There was a dark spot where my forehead met the furniture. "I'm going to clean up the blood," I said. "Don't wait up." "Are you sure you're fine?" "Yes," I lied. The damp cloth from the kitchen didn't make a difference. I was too late. My blood had soaked into the cartoon horse sticker. The red splotch would be a permanent feature of my daughter's closet. It would always remind me of what I had seen. I considered whether the creature that I had seen could have been a byproduct of lack of sleep, but the thought refused to take hold. The body of the creature had managed to seem both impossible and unavoidably real in the same stroke. I knew that I could not sleep unless I convinced myself the horror had never been real, to begin with. With my mind turning faint again, I touched the handle of the closet. My vision was starting to blur, and a familiar sound of static started to buzz around my ears. but I didn't let go of the closet door. I needed to confront reality. I needed to believe that the squiggle wasn't real. The empty closet did not lighten my heart. It simply reminded me of what I saw. It simply made the memory of that burning bush of flesh and eyes shine brighter. The squiggle ran away. She looked at me from her unicorn bed. There was a calmness in her voice which suggested the hell spawn we had both witnessed wasn't a thing worth worrying about. "You saw it? You saw that thing?" She nodded her head. "After you hit your head on the closet, it crawled over you and jumped out of the window." "Crawled over me," I yelled, louder than I should have. I could hear my wife switch on the night lamp in the bedroom. "Yes," my daughter replied. Casually, "The squiggle went over your tummy and out of the window. It's okay. It's not real." The thought of those wet strands of flesh crawling over my body made me feel incurably violated. My abdomen was no longer my own. It belonged to that horrible nightmare. "But you saw it." "Yes." "And you're not scared?" "No," she said. Smiling, I considered whether the squiggle was real, and now I'm brave like you. I wanted to grab her and tell her that she should be scared. I wanted to tell her that what she saw, what we both saw, was something that should inspire wails and despair, but her innocent smile made me turn away. Her fragile mind had made peace with the squiggle. I was the only one being haunted. "Good night, Annie," I said, closing her window and locking it. "Good night, Daddy," she replied, descending back into her blanket. My wife was standing in the doorway of the bedroom, concerned. I told her I couldn't go back to sleep. I told her I needed to be alone. I told her I was going to go watch some television. The screen is tuned to the static of a dead channel. The ashtray is full and the bottle is half empty. We live in a universe that means us harm. We live in a godless world where unearthly abominations hide in little girls' closets. Regardless of how much I drink or how hard I try to rationalize, I cannot convince myself otherwise. All of the windows in the house are shut and locked, but I can hear the birds starting to sing outside. A new day is starting, but I am unable to face it. I cannot carry on knowing that thing is somewhere out there, crawling through the grass. I drink more, praying that the liquor will help me forget. I drink more, desperately hoping that I will be able to convince myself that the abomination was a trick of the eye. I drink more, knowing it won't help. Monster, please save me. I've been stuck in this cabin for a little over a week now. I came here to get away from the city, from the dullness and the monotony of my daily job, hoping I could write my first novel here. This has been my dream ever since I was a kid. Unfortunately, my family wanted me to be a normal person with a normal job. There never was any room for dreams in my life. I just had to go to college and study business, and then get a boring 9-to-5 job at my dad's company. This cabin was bought by my parents for their summer vacations before I was born. They'd acquired it for the beautiful lake that's placed behind it. To go there, you had to trek through the woods. I always thought that the trees arching above you were meant to be nature's guardians, keeping the wildlife and all things beautiful protected under a shield of green. When I was a kid, my dad used to take me fishing there. I liked it a lot. Right until I got reeled in under the water, the fish pulled so hard that I fell overboard. I didn't know how to swim, but luckily my dad jumped in and pulled me back to the surface. Otherwise, I'd have drowned and died. Even to this day, I never learned how to swim, because from that day on, the fear of going into deep waters just stuck with me. Another unsettling thing I realized I loathed from that day on was the fact that we always stopped in the middle of the lake for fishing. We were surrounded by what seemed like a huge eye of water that made me think about monsters and horror living at the bottom. I remember always thinking, what if there was another world there? Another civilization that was able to live and breathe underwater. There's another thing that happened that day, though. As I was going under, I felt something touch my feet. I don't know if it was pushing me up to my dad so he could get me out of the murky waters, or dragging me down to the depths of a liquid, hellish nightmare. Adding to the terror that was already building up, I lost my calm, and as I felt water entering my mouth, flooding my lungs and silencing my screams, I began to panic. Before Dad pulled me up, I turned around to see if it was just my imagination, and then I completely forgot about it for the rest of my life. Until I came back here. Since I started writing, I always liked to do it in utter and complete silence, and this cabin had that to it. It provided me the comfort I needed to get inside my own mind and to pull out the characters and the settings, the monsters, the villains, and the heroes of my stories. Maybe I'd write about my own experiences too. They say that the best stories come from the writer's personal fears, so that was exactly what I wanted to write about. It's somewhat unique to see a setting change so fast from day to night. The chirping of birds made the outside feel alive during the day, and the colors of nature complemented that so very well. When the night came, though, it felt like all just suddenly died down, or maybe it all went into hiding, giving way, or rather allowing for something else to come alive. All the colors faded away, swallowed whole by the darkness of the night, lost for hours in the solemn silence. Then everything came back to life the next morning. The first couple of nights were just that. Silence. Nothing more and nothing less. I got 10 pages done, and I was very proud of myself. I thought it was the best decision I had made in regards to writing the new book. Then, things started getting strange. In the stillness of the night, I began hearing sloshing footsteps circling my house. Whenever I peeked outside the window, there was nothing there. I was only hearing the rustling of leaves that seemed to cry out for help, only for their screams to never exit from that side of the woods. A coyote was howling somewhere in the distance, as if it wanted to let me know of some newly formed danger that was there with me, taking its time on how it would have been best to attack me. I hear the mud moving again. Staccato footsteps thumping like a soggy drumline. It was an ocean sound, the kind of music that crawls out from deep, lost places. The song you'd hear before drowning. Still nothing outside. Only blackness. I heard a knock on the front door, then another. And another. Someone was trying to break inside my house. The knocking turned into violent bangings. Then it suddenly stopped. Silence again throughout the night. It didn't last long, though. A pained shriek of agony pierced through the dark veil of the night, and I felt my house moving from the shock. With it, I too trembled in unspeakable horror. The trees started shaking and the ground trembled again. This was making me mad. This was driving me insane as I felt a lost, ancient curse finally found a new host to torment. I looked outside again. Then I saw something. Lengthy arms finished in dark chromium-like claws were extending from beyond the tree line. They were rapidly advancing towards the cabin. Tens, if not possibly hundreds of them, clawing their way in through the mud. I was a sitting duck. When they reached the house, I asked myself what was at the other end. What could the creatures that these clawed arms belonged to look like? They started intertwining, slithering and snaking their way over the roof and finally breaking the windows. I froze like a statue, kept in place by my fear and rendered unable to move. I heard a thump outside, and then the woods vibrated with a loud metallic hum that reverberated throughout the whole area. The arms retracted instantly from the cabin. They dragged the claws onto the floor, splinters and wood jumping in every direction. The sound was unbearable, almost like someone screamed into my ears. Then a drumming sound filled the air, followed by another loud metallic hum. I heard a large quantity of water splashing in the woods nearby. I instantly thought of a flood made by a gigantic rock dropped by a dark god from the furthest point of the cosmos. The earth started shaking and the leaves were rustling. Gigantic footsteps were cracking down on the trees, laying them flat on the ground. I heard shrieks and screams of anguish and agony. It seemed like the night was hurt and bleeding, almost dying. Some other creature was attacking the monstrosities that were just in my house. The wailing suddenly stopped for a few seconds, then a roar filled the night again. The front door was violently smashed open, and another arm was heading towards me. At an impossible speed, it wrapped itself around me. Like a snake suffocating its prey, it squeezed me so hard that I lost conscience. I woke up to the sound of my body being dragged through the mud. Things were slithering next to me and I knew what they were. They were taking me to the lake, to drown me, to eat me. Their claws slowly began tearing my skin and parting the flesh on my arms. I felt the sharp pain coursing through my body as warm blood was getting lost in the mud. I managed to raise my head up from the ground, and parallel to me there was the shape of a creature. Following alongside, its red eyes never seemed to lose sight of me. It was probably their leader. The thing that have would be for dinner in the kingdom below the lake. It would eat my flesh, drink my blood, and spit out the bones. I watched in horror both at the lake and at the creature trekking through the trees. At that very moment it occurred to me how lucky I was to escape death by drowning when I was just a child. I knew for sure that the things tried to pull me to the depths right then. Now I wasn't so sure I would make it out alive. In fact, I was 100% sure my death would be slow and agonizingly painful. Another claw hit me in the face and momentarily blinked at me. The red-eyed monster disappeared from sight, and I felt my body entering the cold waters of the lake. This was it. My demise. My end. I tried to break free, but to no avail. The arms were wrapped around me, their pointy claws pushing against my skin. I was under the water, the light coming from the moon being the only thing that shone through this place where all sound dies. On the brink of unconsciousness, I felt things getting stuck and sucking on my skin. I tried to move, but the arms were still wrapped around me. I felt the last breath of air escaping my lungs and getting lost in this infinite watery darkness in the form of bubbles. Right before dying, right before I got a chance to see if there was a light at the end of the tunnel, the arms let me go. I felt them going back to the depths, scared. Something pulled me up again from the water and onto the shore. It started resuscitating me. I began coughing, water jumping out from my lungs and splashing my face. My dad saved me again, except he was different this time. He had red eyes, and he was just a shadow made of water. I tried speaking to him, but found out I couldn't do it. "I'm not your dad, I'm just a monster. I saved you then, and I saved you now, child. You are safe now. Those things can't hurt you ever again," the creature said. I froze in fear upon realizing that it was the same creature that followed me when the arms dragged me underneath the murky waters. He was in pain, his breathing hissed, and black blood, the texture of mud, dripped from his mouth and onto the ground below. He told me he wouldn't hurt me, but he too needed help. His name was just that, Monster. He's been there in the lake forever, since before the world even existed. He was protecting the woods and the lake itself from those things that attacked me. The monster told me he doesn't know what they are, or when they first appeared. Whenever they feel fresh blood near the lake, they want to kill. They need to feed. The creatures were always strongest during the night time, he also added. That's why I probably escaped that day, with a little help from him too. For that, I'll be grateful for the rest of my life. He said he needed to rest somewhere where warm water exists. His wounds would have healed quickly, he was immortal after all. I suggested the bathtub back at my cabin, and he agreed. I turned the water on and I saw kindness and solitude burning in his red eyes. He looked at me like he owned me one, when in fact he was the one who saved my life twice. "Thank you so very much, child. You are a kind soul. I am forever in your debt," he said, while letting out a grunt of satisfaction upon placing himself in the tub. "No, Monster. You saved my life twice. I am indebted to you for all eternity and beyond," I replied. I turned around to leave, and before doing so he asked me to come close to him. He gave me an emerald talisman, a powerful ancient artifact that would keep me safe from the things that lurk below the murky waters. "You will be a fine writer, I can already see it. Please, can you write about me? I feel like no one knows me. Except you, of course," he said, a sigh of hurt escaping his mouth. I nodded and closed the door. I slept like a baby that night. It was like nothing ever happened. Maybe the amulet that Monster gave me helped me heal faster. The next morning I went up to the bathroom to see if he was still there. He was not. The water was filled with moss and algae that danced slowly in what looked like a miniature lake trapped inside a bathtub. I sighed and thanked him once again, wherever he was in that lake. Now people will know about you. Thousands of people will know about you, Monster. My son asked me to check the closet for monsters. I didn't need to. I recently went through a pretty nasty divorce, but I got the only thing that mattered out of it: full custody of my 4-year-old son. Lost nearly everything else in the process, so we had to relocate to a new house with barely any luggage or furniture. Truly a fresh new start. I heard him call for me during our first night at our new home. It was a little after midnight, I think. I went to check on him to see what was wrong and sat by his bedside. He was wide awake and asked me to check the closet for monsters, which wasn't surprising given the circumstances. He's still just a little kid, and without even taking into account all the crap he's been put through thanks to my shitty marriage, moving into an unfamiliar, barely furnished home must be a lot to take in for someone his age. And you know how they say that your brain always stays half awake when you're sleeping in a new environment, right? That's all pretty much what went through my mind in a flash as soon as my son spoke. It was no big deal. It was all normal, I thought. But something else almost immediately clicked inside my brain, before I even got to look at where my son had pointed to while he made his innocent request. Something was wrong. I turned my head and looked, and it took everything I had in me to not give in to fear and terror, all for the sake of my son. When you become a parent, you have to protect your children, no matter what, always putting yourself in harm's way if necessary and spare them any and all kinds of things that might hurt them. That's why I didn't freak out. I couldn't, not when we had barely just started our new life. I had to protect him, and at that point in time, as I sat on his bed, I only knew one thing. We had to leave the room. We had to leave the house immediately. "All right, champ," of course I said, faking bravery. Then I made a request of my own as I lowered my voice and got closer to him. "Hey, how about you step outside for a minute? If there's a monster in there, I'll have to kick its butt all over your room." He chuckled and said, "Okay." I made sure to put some extra emphasis on the word "but," because it's something that always cracks him up when I say it. Fortunately, he got stuck on that, and not the fact that I was indirectly admitting to the possibility of there actually being a monster. As soon as he left the room, my mind raced as it started to put together the best and most efficient route to take him out of the house while picking up my car keys and phone on our way out. When I heard the closet doors slowly creaking open behind me, I knew it was time to go. I jumped out of bed, exited the room, and grabbed my son. We were out of the door and inside the car and moving in under a minute. I told him I couldn't sleep, so we were going out for some ice cream to celebrate. He was a little taken aback and asked, "Celebrate what?" To which I replied, "Just us two together. I love you, buddy." It was by no means a lie, but I just had to make sure that he was all right and wouldn't think of anything else as we literally fled our new home. As I mentioned earlier, the house was a new environment for the two of us. I'd been there a couple of times before, cleaned it all up by myself, and assembled what little furniture we had, so I knew for a fact what belonged where and what didn't. And I know his room didn't have a closet.